Today you're joining me for what I'm calling Misfit Mondays. Misfit Mondays are going to be days where I do short videos to show you how you can take misfit, thrown out, rejected items and turn them into something really quite beautiful for your home. So come along and enjoy me. Hi there, this is Heidi with H2 Home Designs, where I share innovative and artful designs that hopefully inspire you in your home. So today's misfit is actually an old screen. It's a screen that I picked up at a cabin on Lake Michigan. The owners of the cabin were getting rid of the shutters and they were getting rid of the screens. And I took these home not really having any idea what I was going to do with them, but I've come up with an idea that I think you're really going to enjoy. And it's an idea that could be used almost any time of the year. And if you like to decorate for the seasons, it's one of those things that you could use all year round. So come along, let's put this project together. All right, to get started, we need to first of all clean the frame of our screen. You can see that there's some bird doo-doo. We've got some old chippy paint coming off of it. There's cobwebs, whatnot. So you want to make sure that you take a little bit of time, just go in and clean it up a little bit, get the cobwebs off, wipe up some of that excess chippy paint that's coming off. And you don't have to worry too much because that's going to give us a little bit of character later on. But we're going to put a finish over the top of the frame itself. So it's going to be important to kind of get some of this crud out of the way. So to create that rusted look of a screen that looks like it's been out in the weather for years and years and years, I'm going to try something, and I haven't done this before, so hopefully it's going to work. So I'm going to create the rusty finish that we have on the screen using a product that's made by Folk Art. It's just a dark rust color, and it comes in a couple of different bottles in the pack. I'm just going to use the darker version of it, and we'll see how that works. You can see it's just a dark brown, and it's got some flakes of something in it to give it sort of a rusty feel. So I'm going to do that, and we're going to use kind of a dry brush technique and see how this works. I've tried a couple of different things, and I think this is the one that's going to give us the closest and the best effect. So let's give this a try. So I don't have it too wet, but I also don't want it too blocky because I don't want to fill the holes of the screen with this paint. So I'm just going to kind of brush back and forth. And part of the beauty of having this darker screen will be that the stenciling that we do later is going to show up better on the screen, and you'll be able to put this on a light colored wall and your stenciling's still going to show up. So you can see I'm just brushing it, trying to cover as best I can. And you can see those dark flakes here. Those are the flakes that they put into this rusty paint to make it look more like rust. And when I'm all done here, if some of these flakes are still here, I may just take a little bit of sandpaper and sand those off so that they don't block the holes in the screen. The next step is to put a stencil on the screen, and I just want to show you, first of all, you can see the rust that we created. Just got some brown spots in the middle, and there's a little bit of that extra paint here that you could, if you wanted to, you could take a little sandpaper and wipe off, but it actually makes it look like rust, so I'm not bothered by it at all. So I picked a stencil. This one is Be Still and Know, and all you need to do is go ahead and center it center it on your screen, and I'm just going to kind of eyeball it here. You can certainly measure if you like. Now, I should say beforehand that I've got, you can see this, the screen is inset here. So I've got it set so that the screen is inset. So if somebody wanted to put some florals down here, tuck them on the inside or what have you, they could certainly do that versus using the other side. I'm going to eyeball it and use a little bit of tape to hold it in place. And this part is important because you want this, we're gonna actually stencil it twice. We're gonna put one layer of paint on, then we're gonna let it dry, and we're gonna do it again, just so that we have a nice, bold imprint or print of our lettering. So you wanna make sure that you've got it taped down well, and it's not gonna be shifting on you while you're painting. This is a, I think this is the chalk paint that I'm using here, and I've chosen white. You could certainly pick your color, but I think white is gonna look best on this a little bit darker rusty background. And when you're stenciling, I've got a stencil brush here. I've got it loaded up with paint, but you don't want too much paint. If you've got too much paint when you stencil, it ends up bleeding underneath the stencil itself. But if there's not enough on there, you're not gonna even see the stenciling that you do when you start. So I'm gonna start here so that you can see that. And I'm just gonna take my brush that's got the paint in it, and I'm just gonna pounce. And I pounce fairly hard so you can see that the screen that's underneath that looks like it's all filled with the paint. And I'm holding the stencil down at the same time so that hopefully we don't have paint that seeps underneath our stencil. And I actually went back to YouTube and watched a couple of videos on the island of misfit toys, this idea of misfit and remaking misfit pieces. And it comes from the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer movie. And I was pretty entertained by it. I don't know if you remember that Rudolph, and I think it's not the Abominable Snowman, but the other gentleman that always had the ice pick with him, they go and land on the island of misfit toys, and they're welcomed by a jack-in-the-box who is there on the island because he's not actually a jack-in-the-box. His name is Charlie, so he was a Charlie in the box. And so they had him there on the island. He met a doll that didn't have a nose, whose owner didn't want her. All kinds of fun, adorable characters. So if you haven't watched the video, search it on YouTube if you don't remember. Just search Island of Misfit Toys and it'll pop up. There's about a 3-minute clip there that you can watch. All right, I'm gonna keep going here until we get all this filled in, and I'll be back in just a minute. And as you're stenciling, keep in mind that it's gonna be important for you to have something like a piece of cardboard underneath your stencil. It helps to absorb a little of that excess paint so that you don't have paint that's kind of glopped up on the back side of your stencil. All right, we're just about finished with our first coat of the paint here. So just go back over it and make sure that you didn't miss any spots. And then this next step is important. It's important to go ahead and let it dry completely. And after we've let it dry completely, we're gonna go in and we're gonna put on a second coat. And that second coat is gonna give us that deeper, richer white color on our backdrop. So it's gonna be important that we do that. I've done it both ways, where you only put in on one layer or you put on two, and I found that the two is definitely better. So we'll let it dry and we'll be right back. So while I'm waiting for this first coat of paint to dry, I'm gonna go ahead and do the technique that I have for the frame itself. And this technique is gonna add some richness, and you'll see once we put it on, it's gonna add some richness and some depth to the frame itself. So we've got all this yummy chippy paint over here, and you'll see when we put this finish on that it really gives it it brings it to life. And I learned this technique from my friend Marianne from Olde Homestead Finds. She's on Facebook if you want to look her up. She's got some beautiful items. She collects a lot of vintage items and items like this that have that chippy finish, and she does a wonderful job of sort of recreating them and polishing them up a little bit, and they just look beautiful. So let me show you how it works. I'm using a polyacrylic. This is clear, it's a matte finish. You can also use a satin finish. She uses satin and her pieces just look lovely, but this is what I've got. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this today. And I'm gonna start over here where the paint is a little chippy so that you can get a good idea. All I'm going to do is use a chip brush, and I've got some of this polyacrylic on a plate. And the reason I'm not using it directly out of the can is that my brush is undoubtedly going to get dirty painting across this because there's still some dirt on it even though I cleaned it. And you're just going to put a thin coat of this polyacrylic on. And let me just take it up a little bit and I'll show you. It's going to dry clear, so you're seeing a hint of it right now, but you can see the difference between here and here. It just adds some depth, a lot like a wax would do if you're using chalk paint and you're waxing your piece, say with a dark wax or a clear wax. It really brings out the richness. So I'm going to make my way all the way around this screen while my paint is drying, and then we'll go back and put on that second coat of paint for the stencil, and we'll show you how it looks. I just finished up the second coat of paint on the stencil, and I'm gonna go ahead and carefully peel it off, and let's see how it turned out. see. It looks like the impression is actually pretty good and it's not smudged or smeared. And that darkening of the screen with sort of that rust color technique, I think helps to bring the stencil out just a little bit more. So I'm gonna let this dry. Our poly has now dried on it. And then we're gonna go ahead and add sort of the little flourishes around the edges. So our paint is dried, stenciling is complete, and we've got that nice poly finish around the outside of the frame that adds a real depth and a real richness, and also gives it a nice clean finish. So even if you've got a little chippy paint here and there, it really covers up that chippy nicely, and it helps it to adhere, number one, to the piece, but also just makes it feel a lot cleaner. So now I'm gonna go ahead and put a hanger on the back before we put our sort of zhuzh and fun on the front of it. I like to use these eye hooks. Hard to see from there, but they're just a tiny little eye, and I put 2 of them on here. This is a really lightweight screen, so we don't have to worry too much about the weight of it or it falling off of a wall. I think the wire that I've got here is a 30-pound wire that's made for picture hanging, and that's to be more than sufficient for this project. You're going to have to take a good look at your frame and decide the best place to put your hangers. First of all, make sure you've got it turned backwards so you're not working off of the front. But you can see here that there's an inner frame and an outer frame. I'm going to make sure that I put my hooks on the outer frame. The inner frame is a little bit thinner, and I'm afraid if I try to put a hook in there, number one, it might go all the way through to the screen, and also I might crack the wood. You also want to create pilot holes before you put these in. You can just do that with a nail and a hammer, pound it in a little bit, pull it back out, and then go ahead and screw these in. So I've got one in place already. I'm just going to go ahead and put the other in real quick for you. And these are not hard to put in at all, especially with this kind of wood, and if you've done a pilot hole, you shouldn't have any trouble at all. Just want to make sure you screw it in as tight as you can without cracking the wood. Okay, so you can see I've got one here, same distance, one here and here. And then I've got that picture hanging wire. I've cut a piece to size, and I've made sure that I have several inches, probably 3 inches on each side of the wire, so I've got enough there to wrap around and make sure that the wire is snug and tight. A couple of years ago, I had a beautiful mirror with a beautiful gold frame on it that was given to me from my grandmother, and a friend had come over and hung it on the wall for me, wrapping it with wire like this, and unfortunately the wrap job didn't hold, and in the middle of the night I just heard a loud crash and a bang, and Grandma's beautiful mirror was shattered into pieces. So as you're doing this, make sure you get plenty of wrap around with the wire so that you don't have that happen. And once you get it on, you're gonna pull it as tight as you can once you get it into that second hole. And again, I'm gonna wrap, and make sure I wrap it well. So that I don't have to worry about this falling off the wall in the middle of the night. But the good news is, if it does, this is lightweight. Nothing should break, possibly the frame, but there's no glass involved. Okay, so you can see we got the hanger there. And you could use it just like this if you like to. It doesn't have to have any kind of zhuzh to it. I kind of like the zhuzh, so let me show you what I'm going to do with that. So we're all set to add our garland or wreath or bow or Christmas bells, whatever it is that you'd like to hang on your piece. I've decided that I kind of like the simplicity of just a garland and some greens. So I picked up this garland, and actually it was quite long. I've just cut it apart for a variety of different projects. And I'm going to go ahead and add this. And I thought, first of all, I might put this at the top of the frame. And then I have a matching wreath. It's a small wreath. And I thought I may go ahead and affix that to the bottom of the frame. So I'm going to start with that. And the beauty of this, if you go with something simple like this, you can add berries, say red berries at Christmas time, and hang some ornaments off the wreath. You could put a pretty Christmas bow on here. For fall, you could tuck in some branches if you'd like, maybe some dried florals, some acorns. The sky's the limit. Wander out in your backyard and see what you can come up with that might help give it a nice fall look. So let's start with the simple green, and then we can add our touches after that. Instead of just placing this in the center like this, I prefer something that's a little bit more artistic and gives your eye kind of something to dance around, if you will, when you're looking at it. So I'm going to go ahead and affix this so that it almost causes your eye to kind of flow sort of down and around the piece. And what that'll do is cause your eye actually to flow around to your wreath that's on the bottom. To do that and to hang those, I found these wonderful little staples, and it's going to be really difficult for you to see these, but it's a staple that you simply tack in. You don't need to have a staple gun. And I'm going to use these and a hammer. They tap in really easily, especially with this wood. I don't know if this is pine necessarily, but probably not pine, maybe maple. And then I think I'm going to put another right up here. So I have two. Alrighty. And then I think I'm going to go with a third staple. And I like how this kind of curves around down here over the B. So I'm going to add this staple over here so that this can't drop down too low. And let me tap that one in. Just get an idea right there of sort of the line that that garland is going to create. And then I'm going to go ahead and put a nail at the bottom. Instead of stapling this one in, I'm just going to put a nail here. That way you can take the wreath on and off if you like to. You could add a bow to it if you prefer at a different time during the year. That one doesn't need to go in too far either. So I've got that, and then I'd like to add a bow or a ribbon to it. I've decided to go with something that fits kind of into the current farmhouse style. Gray, greens, blacks are all very popular right now. So I found this ribbon. Look at this. I thrifted this ribbon. It cost me $2.75 for this whole huge spool. So I'm using it on just about everything. But I thought it had a really nice sort of farmhouse look. And so I'm going to go ahead and use this ribbon. And I'm going to make a really simple bow. There's no need to have a wire for this bow. Simply take it, and just as if you were tying your shoe, make sure you start off with a long enough tail here. Create your loop. Tie it just like you were tying a shoe. And then I like to adjust it so that it looks pretty and that it's tight enough. And then I prefer just to, before I cut it, snip it short, put it into place here, and just get an idea of where it's going to hang before I snip it. So I certainly have plenty on this side here and plenty on that side. So I'm going to go ahead and snip the remaining edge of that bow. And then I'm also going to nail my bow into place. I don't have to that way fuss with glue, and it can be removed later. So I'm just going to put a nail through the center of the bow itself. You don't have to worry too much about that bow moving. And I'll fluff it a little bit. And then I want to just take a look at it and see. You could certainly leave your tails longer, but I like to trim them up just a little bit. And this one, you can see how it kind of curves around. I like that, but I feel like it's still a little bit longer than I want it to be. Trim that off. And straighten it out a little bit, make it look pretty. Now you've got your bow. Fluff that up a little bit, straighten it out maybe a little bit more. All right. So you can see how you get a little bit of a flow here. I almost feel like this needs to be hung up just a little bit higher so it's not covering up the Be Still. Maybe if I just pull it through a little bit, that'll help. I'm gonna play with that a little bit, but let me just show you. This is generally kind of what we're gonna be looking at. Let me give it a little fluff and a little zhuzhing, and then I'll show you a nicer picture of it. So take a look how beautifully this Misfit Monday project turned out. We've taken an old screen that was really ready for the trash heap. I've done a little bit of distressing in the background with sort of that rusty color. Did a little bit of a stencil on it, put a hanger on the back, a little bit of wire, and then just added some really simple greenery and a bow. It's beautiful, and it's something that you could use all year round in your house. And I wanted to show you just how easy it is to add a touch of the holidays. And look, you can simply add a little bit of berries to the top to give it a Christmassy look. Again, you could tuck it with some branches if you have some branches that are kind of cascading off the top, how beautiful that would be. And the bow itself can be anything you can imagine. You can do something that's more of a jute or a hemp bow. You could do a satin bow. You could do a velvet bow. There's all kinds of beautiful options that you could try for this. So don't be afraid to take the castaways and make something beautiful out of them. I think it's gorgeous. All right, you guys, tell me what you think of this Misfit Monday project. This is a project that's really, really simple to do. And I'm going to encourage you just to take another look at those items that you have around you that you're thinking, oh, I just got to get rid of this. There's nothing I can do with this. It has no value. And really rethink it, because this screen was ready for the garbage. And now I think it's ready to be hung in an art gallery, if you will. So thank you so much for joining me. Join me again next week for another one of my Misfit Mondays. And as I always say, be the reason that someone smiles today. Take care.
Hey Heidi, what you doing?
Hey, I'm looking through the trash for another project for my Misfit Mondays. Join me next week.
Video credits go to my talented friend, Ashley.